It's Friday, August 22nd. Yesterday, a guy named James Dobson died. He was the leader of Focus on the Family. He was virulently homophobic and anti-LGBTQ to the point where, we'll put it this way, every other straight guy that I've ever met in my entire life who hated gay men as much as James Dobson did was themselves, in reality, a gay man. But, whatever. My brother and I have discussed many times how incredibly fortunate we were that we did not grow up in religion. Religion was not something that was compulsory in our childhoods. The only times that we really went to church was when we spent summers with our grandma and grandpa on their farm, my dad's parents, in Mansfield, Ohio. And they were Lutheran, and we would go to Oakland Lutheran Church out on 545 near the old Ohio Reformatory. But that was a community of farmers, and church on Sunday mornings. And I mean, my grandpa was a deacon in the church. My grandma was in the choir, and she was a Sunday school teacher. And so when we were at the farm, we would go to church on Sunday mornings. But it was much, 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 much more about community and that community of farmers coming together once a week with their families. The emphasis was much more on that than it ever was on the religious aspect of things. And, every Sunday morning after church and after Sunday school in the basement, they would have a huge potluck lunch. And everybody would just hang out for a couple hours, and that's when you got to socialize back then. And that was great. It was fantastic. We were hanging out with all of our cousins and all of their friends. And I didn't have any understanding of the concept of religious trauma for children in the United States until I joined TikTok and I started finding and following the pages of people who were deconstructing their Christianity and talking about the horrific things that they had been through as children because of religion, because of Christianity in the United States and the conservative Republican United States version of Christianity. James Dobson was a driving force behind that for decades. And I remember seeing this book when I was a kid. I never read it. It was never, I think I probably saw it at a friend's house or something when I was a little kid. James Dobson wrote a book. He wrote a lot of books, but he wrote one book. I think it was called something like The Strong-Willed Child. And it was a book that was a guide for and advocated for parents hitting their children, and how it was godly and it was consistent with scripture and how to do it. He wrote books on how to beat your children and sold millions and millions and millions of copies of those books. And so on my backup account, I duetted at least a half a dozen videos from people who had grown up in those kinds of religious environments, talking about the absolute horror and abuse that they experienced when they were children because of the teachings of James Dobson, who died yesterday. And I very much hope that he is enjoying his time in hell. Let alone being a gay kid growing up in that environment. James Dobson was very pro conversion therapy, forcing your gay child to not be gay. Again, I've never known a straight guy who was obsessed with homosexuality like that who wasn't himself gay. So, of course, James Dobson was a leading spiritual advisor for one Donald J. Trump. And a guy named Philip Elliott wrote an article about this yesterday. Dobson's passing comes as the current Republican Party has shifted away from its faith-grounded conservative impulses to one that is fighting culture wars based on grievance more than gospel. Could you imagine being a trans kid growing up in that kind of fucking environment? I mean, from what I've seen on TikTok is it takes decades to recover from being raised by parents who subscribe to the teachings of James Dobson. Continuing on. Gone are the days when someone like Dwight D. Eisenhower, who did not join a church until after his election as president, when someone like him could actually capture the GOP nomination. Now, Republican candidates trip over themselves in displays of public faith. It's hate. It's hatred. To kowtow to the hardcore base that sees the show as a substitute for substance. Dobson's feverish crusades against pornography, gambling, divorce, and even SpongeBob SquarePants now seem almost quaint in a party that has fully embraced Trumpism. Modern MAGA, Republican, conservative, evangelical Christianity is based 100% on hatred, punishment, and retribution. They hate women. They hate any member of the LGBTQ community. They believe they are all pedophiles and groomers, even though every single person who seems to get arrested for those things is a MAGA Republican. They hate minorities in direct contradiction to the teachings and the actual words of Jesus Christ, who they claim to follow. I mean, I saw a guy yesterday who put up a TikTok that said Christians who have deconstructed their Christianity are the most Christ-like. And the people who proclaim their evangelical Christianity the loudest are the least Christ-like. And I thought that kind of nailed it.